Welcome to the Foundry Gallery. I'm Kathryn Mohrman, one of the member artists of the gallery, and I'm delighted that you can join us today. The gallery's current solo show presents the work of our guest artist, Jim Earl. Entitled Now and Then, 50 Years of Prints. The show runs from July 1st to August 30th, so you have a few more weeks left to see it. We're really pleased to have Jim here via Zoom to talk about his work. But before Jim begins, I want to make a couple of logistical suggestions. We're going to spend most of our time looking at Jim's pictures and prints. So what I would suggest is that everyone goes up to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and click on the button that says full screen. It's like a little rectangle, just only the corners show. Okay. And that will maximize the picture on your computer. Secondly, up in that same area of the screen, you'll see the words gallery view or speaker view. What that means is whether you're seeing pictures of everybody who's on this call or pictures of just the person who's talking. So if you practice right now, you can, because I'm the only person talking, you can decide whether you want speaker view or gallery view, but gallery view is mostly to see the people, speaker view is to see the person who's talking. Especially when Jim is talking, you want to be sure that you're in speaker view. Now, please go to the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, and you can see a little icon of a microphone. Mm-hmm. Please click on that to mute yourself.
Can I pay you tomorrow?
So,
doesn't include me, I hope.
That does not include you. No, Jim, you cannot. But I'm going to suggest, please, everyone else, go down to the lower left and click on the little microphone. Then we won't hear, if you have a dog barking or someone comes into your room or you get a phone call or something, we won't all hear it. Now, I'm sure there are going to be questions and comments as we go along. So you'll notice at the bottom in the center, there's a little box called chat. And so if you have a question, please click on chat and type in your question. At the end of the formal portion of this Zoom call, Jim is going to answer as many of your questions and comments as we have time for.
And as I have answers for.
Okay, well, you can always say, I don't know. I mean, good point.
I could always make something up.
Just remember, there are a lot of people here who know you. Maybe they'll be able to catch you in your fibs. You know, we got to watch out.
They do.
And I want to remind you that we are recording this session and it will be put on YouTube and on the Foundry Gallery website. So now let's turn to Jim's artistic work. As most of you know, Jim lives near Annapolis and he's been making prints for 50 years. He's best known for his beautiful etchings, a number of which are hanging in the Foundry Gallery right now. I'd like to show 3 of them to you just to demonstrate why we are so pleased to feature Jim as our solo artist this summer. So let me share my screen.
Ooh.
Okay, can you see the screen that says Jim Earl Now and Then, 50 Years of Prints?
I can.
Okay. This is the first print. It's entitled 2.5 Trees. We're going to talk more about this picture in a few minutes, but it's one of the ones I want to make sure that you see and understand why we are so excited about Jim's work. This print is entitled Queen, Conch, and Drill. I'm kind of intrigued by the combination of one natural item and one industrial strength item. And the third one I want to show you is Kinder Silos. This is in Savannah, near Savannah Park, near Annapolis. And in fact, this print has already sold. So you can see from these three prints that Jim juxtaposes the near and the far, the mundane and the mythic in very interesting ways. So let's talk with him about his work. Then we're going to let him.
Okay.
Okay. I need to, this screen sharing thing is always the challenge.
Yes, I know.
We've been through this once before. Okay.
I just want to mention that the Queen conch and cordless drill is a prize-winning print. I've won 2 prizes with that print. And,
Interesting.
it has one thing that I do, which is have a still life in the foreground and a landscape in the background, which I haven't seen anybody else doing that.
Okay. But Jim, I'm really curious to know how a physics professor at the University of Maryland became an artist and a printmaker. I understand that Andy Warhol played an influence. You want to tell us about that?
Sure. I was on sabbatical at Caltech, so we went to a museum in Los Angeles. It was Los Angeles County, and I was wandering around and I stumbled over some Brillo boxes that were lying on the floor, and I called Sylvia over and she said, "Oh, this just discarded packing boxes." But I had already realized that they were Andy Warhol sculptures. And I took a very careful look at them and told myself, you can do this, namely silkscreen printing. And sure enough, when we got back, I did start making silkscreen prints in the attic of our house, and the rest is history. And one other thing we brought back from California is Matthew Earl, who we call our California baby.
And he's on this call, if I'm not mistaken.
There he is.
Okay. Well, let me show everybody 2 images from this period. No, I want to be here. There. Okay.
Well,
can you tell us a little about these 2?
Yes, indeed. On your left is a print called Metro Test. And it may not be my very first silkscreen print, but it's very early. And it's based on a news photograph out of the Washington Post with a lot of changes that I made in it. And it got me hooked because I put it in an art show somewhere and it won a prize. So the other thing I want to point out about it is the number 5 on the front of the train engine. And that is there because at about this time I saw Charles Demuth's painting called I Saw the Number 5 in Gold, which is based on a poem by William Charles Williams. And anyway, I've been sort of fascinated by the number 5 ever since. And so I put it in this print, and there are several others. And if you look behind my head on the wall behind me, there's a Robert Indiana print, which is also based on the number 5. So enough for that. And this one on the right is our son, David Earl, at about age 6. And when I started to make prints, pretty soon I started to make silkscreen copies of drawings that David had done. And 2 of those are in the Foundry show. The one that he is sitting in the middle of here in his pajamas, unfortunately, is not one that was in the show, but it's another one that David did. So I think that's about enough for this.
Okay. Well, this gives you a little bit of an insight into Jim's early engagement with silkscreen, including getting his kids involved. And continuing in this tradition, this is another piece that is in the exhibit. It's called 3 Drips. It's an homage to Jasper Johns and Samuel Beckett's collaborative book called Fizzles. So tell me how this is what this relationship is with Jasper John.
Well, in the book Fizzles, which is a classic, very important art book, Jasper Johns has several images which he created by just dripping paint on the plate and then making it into a black etching.
Oh,
The phone is ringing. I can't find the phone. Go get it and turn it off. But anyway, that's my printer ringing. Okay.
So in other words, you were really trying to not imitate, but reflect John's technique.
Well, that's right. I made my own drip,
Yeah.
same way that he did. But then instead of just letting it go at that, which I couldn't do, I didn't want to just imitate Jasper Johns. But I made 3 identical drips facing each other,
Mm-hmm.
and on a background that fades from dark at the right to very light white at the left. And that's what I try to do, is to have my prints merge into the white space on the map. And I did this all on Photoshop, and it was it was fairly recent, but it was before I met my mentor, who is Jake Muirhead, and my very recent prints are all influenced by him, by his mentoring.
Uh-huh.
So that's another phase of my career, pre-Jake and post-Jake.
Okay, so we're sort of right at the cusp then, at this moment. Between
Well, yes, it was pretty soon after this that I met Jake.
That's what I was inferring. But I think what we have to do is give credit to your involvement in physics as well.
Yes.
So as an experimental physicist, you're an emeritus professor from the University of Maryland, where you taught for decades. But
Yes.
I found out that in the early 1960s at the University of Minnesota, you conducted balloon-borne experiments that demonstrated the existence of cosmic electrons. And maybe you could tell us just a bit about this, although it's not art per se, it's part of you.
It sure is. It's what I spent my life on until about age 40. But anyway, the purpose of the balloon flights was to take a cloud chamber, which I'll describe what that's all about in a minute, but take it right up 25 miles above the surface of the Earth. And at that altitude, it's essentially as if it were in outer space. And what the cloud chamber does is it takes a picture every couple minutes. And when it takes a picture, it reveals the tracks of whatever particles happen to be going through right when it takes the picture. And the word cloud chamber derives from the fact that the chamber is full of a gas mixed with water and alcohol. And when the cloud chamber expands, it takes a picture, and then the whole thing turns into a cloud. But anyway, this is not just any cosmic ray. It's a primary electron. And you can see there at the top of the picture, in following the arrow, there is one particle, and that's a single primary cosmic ray electron. And it's got a tremendous amount of energy, which it starts to share with other particles contained in these horizontal strips, which are lead plates viewed edge on. But you can just forget about most of what's in the lead plates and think of them as just millions of electrons held in place by a few lead nuclei. And so this electron comes in with a tremendous amount of energy. It starts sharing its energy among more electrons, and then they start sharing their energy among even more. And so it goes until there are a large number of electrons. So that's what you're seeing here. It's kind of like the coronavirus, except
Wait a minute.
it's a energy sharing process and not a virus sharing process.
But what intrigues me is that this plate, which is the record of what you were studying, actually looks a little bit like an etching, just because of the sort of graphic nature of it and the black and white shading. Was that what inspired you to move from silkscreen to etching?
No, it isn't. But what has inspired me is, as you say, this picture of an electron, and I'm thinking of making it into an etching.
Huh.
And I have thousands of pictures of different weird occurrences in the cloud chamber. So there's unlimited material for etchings there.
Well,
But this is, make no mistake, this is a photograph, not an etching.
yes, yes. And what was it that got you to change your methodology from silkscreen to etching? Was it your mentor?
No. Well, yes, it was actually a different mentor. And his work is displayed behind me on the wall. Yeah, I can get a little better view of it, but his name was Jim Forbes, and he was a professor at the University of Maryland.
Uh-huh.
And I started out doing silk screens completely untutored. And after a while, I decided, well, maybe you better learn to draw a little bit. And so I enrolled in art classes, and including printmaking, which was etching. And that switched me over to doing etchings because I like it a lot better than the silk screen.
Oh, interesting. Well, let's take a look at a couple of your etchings in more detail.
Okay, yes.
This is two views of Sparrows Point, an industrial area near Baltimore.
Go get the books, Sylvia.
One done in the out of doors at the scene, and one
Bring
in
them
the finished etching.
They're right over in their usual place.
Oh.
Okay,
Maybe you can tell us about them.
bring them all. Just bring a big handful. Sylvia, this is on the left is a pen and ink drawing in one of my sketchbooks, which I carry around all the time. And whenever I get a chance, I make a drawing of something or other. And Sylvia is bringing in a big pile of them.
Can you figure which book?
Where are they? They're a big pile of sketchbooks. I have 12 of them, all nearly full. But anyway, this is a natural source for material for etchings. And on the right is an etching that I made. This is Sparrows Point, which of course is the subject of the drawing too. And it's what happened when I worked a little bit and converted the drawing into an etching. By this time I had gotten much looser, as you may notice. But what I want to point out there is the gray sky, which I put in by putting my finger in paint and just making thumbprints all over the sky. And the down below, there's a semicircular. And believe it or not, when I was doing all this, what was going through my mind was the number 5, because if you look at this, you can see that the bay down on your right merges with the white sky to form a slightly misshapen 5. But anyway, that was what was going through my mind. And this is a soft ground and hard ground etching. So.
And without going into too much detail, what's the difference?
Well, hard ground is hard. And so that means that you actually have to scratch into the enamel, which is painted on the plate. You have to actually scratch a hole in the enamel so that when you put the plate in the acid, it will etch. Soft ground is the same sort of thing. It's kind of a covering of the plate, but it's full of wax, which means that when you just put a piece of paper over it and write with a pen or with a pencil or with a hard scribe or something like that, underneath the paper, it goes through the ground and makes it so the acid can reach the plate and etch it.
Oh, okay, you never knew that. Well, let's look at another.
Okay,
This is the 2.5 trees that we saw at the very beginning, but this shows some of the different phases. Can you talk about that, please?
sure. The one up in the left is a charcoal drawing that I made sitting at Kinder Park, which is in Severna Park. And it's the basis for the etching, which Kathryn introduced this talk with. And so these are the different stages of making the etching. And the one at the top right is the first stage. And that's where I took a sheet of coarse sandpaper and pressed it through a hard ground. So the pattern of the granules on the sandpaper came out as this tone made of very small dots.
Huh.
And then the next stage is in the lower right.
Wow.
And this is where I moved a couple of trees into the picture and started to develop them using with stylus working in the soft ground. And the next stage is an even further stage where I was beginning to get the background behind the trees. But if you could compare it with the original, you can see that the right in the center, near the non-pine tree, you can see a view of the horizon, which is just right in the middle of the white space between the trees. And to finish off the print, I made the horizon go all the way across the whole image. But it's a process of multiple stages, which I think is kind of unique because most people just make a drawing on the plate and then etch it, and that's the end of it. So I guess that pretty much covers that.
Okay. Well, you've already told us about the number 5, but I know that you're interested in mathematics more broadly. This is a print called Golden Section. And I understand that the golden section, or sometimes called the golden ratio, comes from a mathematical formula that equals the ratio of approximately 1.618 to 1. I looked this up. I didn't memorize it. So tell me how the golden section influences your artistic work and your compositions in particular.
Well, it's not just me. If you go back in history, even at the time that they were building the pyramids, the pyramids reflect this ratio, which is supposed to be the most pleasing way that you can divide the space. And I think of the golden ratio not as 0.618034. That's a little bit different from what Kathryn said, because she had another version of it, which is 1 over, or which is 1.68034. And it turns out that 0.618034 is 1 over 1.68034. I guess that's too many of those numbers. But anyway, this is a graph of the way it works. That works out to be an equation, and this X marks the spot is where everything comes together, and that's the point that marks the golden ratio. But the golden ratio is just too much of a pain. It's not a simple number. So what I actually use in my prints is Fibonacci numbers, which are the sum of a series in which each number is the sum of the two previous numbers. And just I'll just recite them. It goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And it turns out that these numbers, as you go up in up the series, get very close to the golden ratio. And so I don't worry about the golden ratio. I just make my prints so that, for example, in a 5x8 print, 5 and 8 are both golden ratios. And when I put a line across it, I put across at 3. So there's a square of 5 and a line at 3. And so it goes with even bigger prints. And the one I do a lot of are 8x13, both of which are Fibonacci numbers.
Mm-hmm. And I understand that that the nature spiral things also reflect some of these same proportions, so that like a snail shell or even the pictures of a hurricane are part of this mathematical process.
Well, that's what they say, but there's a lot of controversy about that. But what's perfectly clear is that in buildings and in like the pyramids, and much later the cathedrals, Chartres Cathedral, they reflect the golden ratio very accurately. I'm not sure that the seashell is really close, but there is a way of making a spiral figure out of these divisions of space.
Well, there's something I never knew. And well, I'm really fascinated, Jim, by the fact that you've done lots of different things. If you look at 3 drips, you look at Sparrow's Point or 2.5 trees, it's hard to imagine the same person creating all the things we've looked at today. So it's been interesting to sort of see how you've progressed during your career. And so this has been very interesting and a great introduction. I do think, though, that it's time for our other participants to have a chance to ask you some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we've got a couple things in the chat box. Let's see what's here. Well, someone's having sort of having a technical problem. I'm sorry about that. Then the question is, when you were doing silkscreen, did you teach yourself or did you take classes before you went to the University of Maryland?
No, I never had, well, recently at the community college, I have taken the silk screen classes. But I did teach myself, but there's enormous literature telling you how to do it. So, you know, I had spent my life doing technical things, and this was, for me, it was just another technical thing, and I had no problem doing them.
Another question is, etchings or prints in general mean that you're making multiple copies of the same image or from the same plate.
Yeah.
How do you decide how many to make?
I make them until I get really tired of it. And that turns out to be somewhere between 10 and 20.
And if you have fewer, does that mean that your prints are more valuable? That if you only have 10, that's more valuable than if you have 20?
Well, I don't charge more.
Well, like, I mean, thinking of limited editions, for example.
Well, they're limited, all right, but I don't, when I'm pricing and trying to sell them, I don't pay much attention to how many are available, because
Okay.
there are always plenty.
Well, one of the things I noticed as I was looking at your different images, that they all have a white border around them. Is that a conscious choice, or is that just because you have to have some spare paper in the process, the printing process?
No, that's a conscious choice. And what I do is when I make a print, I leave a white border, a unetched border on the plate itself.
Oh, okay.
So that when the plate is printed, the plate makes a slight indentation, which sort of looks like there's a mat on the print
Oh,
when it's framed. But actually, I frame all my prints with no mat, so that that means that the white space around the print is the same color as the white space in the print. And that's how I get the white space to leak out over beyond the actual print.
and is that just a preference of yours to have more of a white space, give it a little more framing or matting around it?
Yes, that's just a preference. Or, well, it's a standard procedure based on preference. There's nothing sacred about it.
If anyone wants to unmute themselves by clicking on the little microphone and ask a question directly, this would be a good time. Well,
Can I say something?
certainly.
Oh, sure. Okay, I wanted to tell Jim that the thing that I love in his show, in the 2.5 Trees, is the way that he used the tone behind the trees to sort of envelop the trees the way they really are, so that when you look at a tree in the winter, you see the branches, but then there's everything else that kind of makes the shape of the tree. And I love the way you use the etching process to make that tone, because it works perfectly for the way you really see a tree. And I wanted to say that, to me, the idea of thinking ahead in that way, so that you have to almost think backwards to do the tone first and then the branches second? Is that how it works?
Well, you do have to think ahead to do it that way. And, you know, I went through the stages of 2.5 trees. And so you know how I got the tone with the
Sandpaper.
sandpaper.
Sandpaper, right.
But it definitely takes thinking ahead.
Mhm.
You know, I'm always starting with or at least in that case, I'm starting with a charcoal drawing so that you're thinking backwards, I guess,
Exactly.
but you know where you're going.
Yeah.
So it's I just want to mention
Mhm.
that one of the audience is our son, David Earl. Wave your hand, David.
Are you wearing your pajamas?
Not yet.
I'm teasing from his when his 6-year-old self.
But anyway, that makes 3 of our sons who are logged into this event.
Great.
Yes, David Earl, Matthew Earl, and Jim Earl.
Very good.
Nice.
We have another question in the chat box, and maybe this will be our last question or comment. You talked early on when you had the conch shell and the drill that you like to combine a close still life with a more distant landscape in the background. What emotionally does that signify to you?
Emotionally?
Well, artistically, intellectually, anywhere you want to. In other words, what brings you to this concept of still life plus landscape?
I don't know. By the way, I do want to mention that at 2.5 trees, which I think is one of the best prints I've done, but that is definitely post Jake. Now, getting back to the landscape and still life, I have 2 or 3 smaller prints. And I don't know how I hit on the idea, but I've got one that's, for example, a skill saw next to a big ocean, and another one which is well, I forget what it was, but anyway, there were several prints in which I incorporated this concept of having a landscape behind a still life. And of course, when you're drawing, looking out a window, that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So that, it's not at all unnatural. Well, it is unnatural, but it's perfectly understandable. So,
well, I could ask a
Please.
further. So Jim, so just to elaborate on that, it's not just in the still life and landscape, but in a lot of your landscapes, there's something close and something far. It's something distinctive about your way of doing art or of seeing or something. I mean, I don't know if there's anything more to be said about it, but it's quite distinctive in a lot of your etchings.
Before I answer your question, I want to point out to everybody who doesn't know Jay that this is Jay Petersell, who is largely responsible for getting this show going at the Foundry Gallery and has been tremendously helpful to me. And so I want to express my appreciation to him.
Well, it's a tremendous show. It's a tremendous show. But go on. Yeah, but now we can finally hear the answer to this question.
You know, I forgot your question.
Whatever it was. Don't worry about it.
No, it was,
Just this near and far thing.
no, but I'll answer it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of seeing.
Yeah.
I don't know where it came from, but that's the way I see things.
Mhm.
I look out there and I see a potential image, and I kind of put everything in that I possibly can, whether it's near or far. And so it's just seeing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good way to bring this conversation to a close, because how you see is really what determines what the artistic output is going to be. And I think that we've all learned a lot today about how you see, Jim, and what you see, and in a sense, what you're sharing of that vision with all of us. I might make a reminder to those of you in the audience who live in the Washington, D.C. area, that Jim Earl's prints are on display at the Foundry Gallery for the rest of August. And we would welcome you to come. We're open 1 to 7 on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays each week. So that gives you a couple of weekends to come by and see it. And I want to say thank you again for joining us this afternoon. And special thanks to you, Jim, for sharing your work with the Foundry Gallery and giving us this fascinating look at your journey through printmaking today. Thanks so much. And you have all kinds of nice congratulatory remarks in the chat. So let's hear it. You can unmute yourself.
Well, I want to thank the Foundry Gallery for having me, and I'm glad that we and they were able to put on this Zoom event.
Well, I am too. It's been really a delight. So thank you. Thank you so much for telling us all about it. And as I said, I urge you to come down and see the prints for yourself at the gallery.
Thank you.
Go.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Great exhibit.
Bye, everyone.
Oh, bye, Jimmy.
Bye, everyone.